It's funny because your contact in my phone is Lilly, Mikhail's former roommate.
Yours for a really long time was, because I had a couple of Logans, like one from soccer at home and stuff.
Yeah.
And so yours was Logan, Mikhail's.
Like apostrophe S, like it belongs to her.
I just needed to know which one you were.
That's funny.
But that was the best that I could come up with at the time.
You know, the crazy thing is that's how the last names were actually more invented. It was stuff like John by the way, because you live by the way, or Smith, because you were a Smith.
Yeah.
You know?
We did a whole thing in 5th grade where our teacher like went through different people's names or like last names and was like, "Oh, this is what like your family would have done and where it came from."
Yeah.
Which was kind of disappointing for all of like the ones of us that it was like they were like, you just have one.
Son of Gib.
Yeah.
Your dad's name was Gib. Yeah. That's the same with me. He probably just came from like son of Richard.
Yeah.
Some cool guy named Richard once upon a time did something dope, and everyone after that was like, "Yo, you're the son of Richard.
He's important. He needs to be remembered."
Yeah. Not me. Dude, maybe I'm gonna change my last name. Everyone from here on out is gonna be Logan's son.
Logan's son. I feel like I claim these.
Cool. But you mentioned that you and your mom were going to do a podcast?
Yeah. So, somewhere out in the world from like 2 years ago, because, COVID was, people tried different things.
I mean, that's when podcasts exploded.
Yeah. Well, you had nothing left to do except like sit
and chat and record it.
But yeah, so there's, I think, 2 episodes of a podcast that we did where, and I think the original problem was because like, we were just like, oh, it would be fun for us to just like talk about things that we're interested in, or just like, because, we like can go on and on about like movies or music or just pop culture kind of stuff. And so we were like, oh, it'd be fun for nobody to listen to us talk about this and stuff. And then we just didn't, like, I have one of my friends listened to both episodes and was like so excited for us to keep doing it, but we just like got busy and didn't.
Bummer.
But yeah, because around the same time, one of my uncles is a sportscaster.
Oh, way cool.
And so
it's in the blood. Yeah,
so he's like done podcasting different stuff before, and him and my cousin were doing like a sports one. It was like kind of similar to like what the New Heights podcast that Jason Kelsey and Travis do.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't actually listened to it, but yeah.
So like during the football season, they will go through and like review, but like week by week, all the games and like different stuff in the league. And so they were kind of doing that just like with sports in general. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's like, well, if they can do it, we could do it.
Would you ever get a feature on it if you asked? Like, hey, I want to come chat sports with you guys.
I don't know that they do it anymore now that he has a new job, but I have a feeling that the response that I would get would be like, stay in your lane.
Just sit down. Stay in your Lilly podcast zone.
We're allowed to fight about sports not on record, but
tough. But you guys did make 2 episodes?
Mm-hmm.
And they're floating around out there somewhere?
Somewhere, yeah. It was on, because I know whatever the, like, it was like a purple icon, whatever the app was, I think was bought out by somebody else, and so it's not the same thing anymore.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I would say it's mostly just me fighting with DoorDash to see, because at the time we lived with my grandparents, and so we lived in like the main bedroom on the front of the house. Well, so it was like the door, and then there was a window, like just to the front. And I wanted to see if the DoorDash driver would leave my food at the window, like under the special instructions. I was like, please leave it front window. And then he didn't. So I was like, Kevin, what are we doing?
And now it's in the podcast?
Yeah.
You're venting about the DoorDash
I was venting about Kevin, because I was like, it's in the instructions, just do it.
Now that's something I would listen to.
Right?
That could be fun.
I was like, it's not hurting anybody.
Sure. You're just venting, getting something off your chest. It's probably more interesting to listen to than like my daily observations are.
Yeah.
No, that's sick. You guys should hop back on that. And your mom's an interesting character too. Like, she would be interesting. She'd be fun to listen to.
Yeah, we talked about it when I was at home, and that was basically the thing, was just like, it would take a lot more like regiment than we're necessarily gonna do. But maybe one day.
Maybe one day. And like with this podcast, you may have heard it on the other episodes, but I'm not trying to get big with this or anything. Honestly, I just think it's fun. I think it's fun just to sit down with people and just have an excuse to chat with them and hear about their stories. And it's also cool because, like, 2 birds with 1 stone, you then get a recording of those stories, almost like a vault of history.
Yeah, well, and that's what my mom was saying too, because like, and I feel like podcasts, that's how they become popular, is like, it's not fun to just be like, oh, I have to get the content.
Yeah.
that like that does work sometimes, but it also just kind of makes it seem really inauthentic.
Yeah.
But that's what my mom was saying, is like at the very least it's kind of like a genealogical history of just like different things that we talked about or like conversations that were had.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was like, that can be fun too.
Which is neat, especially when a lot of people don't journal anymore. Like
Yeah.
I used to be, I don't know, I used to be kind of good at it. Like I'd write a journal entry like once a week.
Yeah.
And then you fall off, you know, the momentum stops. And then you pick it up again a year later. You're like, hey, I'm back. I'm still alive. And,
Yeah.
But with podcasts, it's so much easier to just get information out there because you can talk so much faster than you can write.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what, yeah, I'm the same way, because my mom, she tried her hardest, because journaling, she was always like, it's so important, you need something to pass on to your kids. And she used to make me, like, I still have the journal, but she used to make me write, like, every day. And I was so mad about it. Like, every day, I was just like, this is stupid, and I don't want to do this, but also this happened to me today. And so it was a lot easier for me now, where it's like, I still have one, and like you said, it's like, I come back to it every once in like 6 months or something, and I'm like, here's everything that happened to me in the last 6 months.
Yeah. Do you keep it like handwriting, or is it an online document?
It's a handwriting. I prefer to handwrite pretty much everything.
Really?
So, yeah.
That's an unpopular take.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It's unfortunate because I also have horrible handwriting.
Oh.
So, like, I'm going to have these pages of things that I've written down and nobody's going to be able to read it.
I guess it's kind of a benefit, though.
Yeah, you know.
It's like a secret handwriting, like what Da Vinci used to do.
Yeah, my mom literally, my entire life, my mom's been like, she writes like an adorable little serial killer. It's fine. Like,
that's funny. I'm in the same boat, and I just write slow.
Yeah.
But I do know that there's like research and science to back the fact that if you write something, it like sticks with you way better than would otherwise.
Because it's visual and tactile.
Yeah, there's value in that. But it's kind of funny how journaling has progressed over time from like writing in a book to typing in a document.
Yeah.
To now we're just talking about it.
Yeah. Now it's just out there in the air.
Yeah. But I totally agree with what you said. Like the second it feels like it's a chore, it's no longer fun. And with just little fun, passion side projects like this, if it's a chore, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. So. Well, and that's why it's so hard for when passions become jobs, because it's hard to find that balance where it's like, okay, I have to keep the joy in it or I'm not going to want to continue doing it. And like that hint of like special in it is gone, but then you also like you do have to keep yourself accountable and like make sure you stay up on it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's crushing. And that's why I see the wisdom when people say like, hey, if you have a passion or a hobby, consider maybe not making that your job. Like if you love the piano, maybe don't make that your job, even though you could be really good at it.
Yeah.
But then I could also argue the other way, where if you're truly passionate about something, then no matter how rigorous it becomes down the road, you're going to push through and become one of the greats.
For sure. And I think and I feel like it too depends on what it is, because kind of like you're saying, is like most people who become greats didn't do it for the monetization. Like that kind of came at it culminated as they went.
Exactly.
And I feel like, where it's like ultimately they'd be doing it with or without the money. Like, you know, because I feel like it's a Luke Combs song or whatever when he's like, you know, he's like, I would still be doing this even if nobody was really, even if I was doing it in a dinky bar in Tennessee. Like,
and I think that's the mentality. I think that's a good mindset to go forward with if you're going to pursue your passion. Be like, would you be okay still doing this if it didn't bring you anything outside of the pure fact that you're doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's cool. So what would you do? Like, if money wasn't a thing, if you didn't have to worry about that, what would your passion be?
That's such a good question. I don't know, because I do really enjoy writing and different stuff. And so I feel like I have little books that I actually have started writing where it's because I'm really into music and movies and stuff. And so I have these 2 little journals that I've been writing. I'll write a song and then go through why I really enjoy it and what about it and kind of pick it apart and be like, oh, well, this is what it means to me and this is the meaning I have behind it. And kind of the same with not so much analyzing, but kind of just interpreting music. And then I have one that also kind of goes with TV shows and movie scenes and stuff like that. So yeah.
That's really new. I've never heard that from anyone before.
Yeah. It's kind of fun.
Dang, so you pick apart other literary, artistic works and apply them to your life, kind of do an in-depth analysis just for fun.
Yeah, it's kind of, well, and it's just where I'll be talking, it'll be oh, well, this scene and why this scene is important, or I think it's important, or what. And that's why I try to keep it where, you know, I'm not interpreting it I'm not this is what the artist meant. I'm just this is how I received it, and like this is what I've gotten from it.
That's kind of cool because that's a form of journaling as well.
Yeah.
Like it's a way for other people to get an insight into how does Lily feel? How does she interact with the world? What's her perspective on stuff?
Well, and I think it would be fun because it kind of opens that conversation of like, well, this is what it meant to me, but it also like, you know, how did you interpret that lyric, or like what did that what memory comes with this song to you and different stuff. So yeah, I feel like it's one of those things like I have in theory the book, and if I could I might publish it, but it's also like very much nobody necessarily needs to hear my thoughts, but it would be fun to like start a conversation about anything the same way like kind of you said with like the podcast and stuff. It's just fun to have conversation about stuff.
Yeah, totally. Especially if you didn't have to worry about income, like if you could spend your time however you wanted. That'd be cool.
For sure.
Well, if it's worth anything, that's a book that I would read. I think that'd be fascinating. That's cool. So you'd be an author.
Something. I'll say yeah. I feel like when you take money out of it, it's almost like, well, I could do, like, I could just try anything. And, like, because it's like when you ask kids what they want to be, and you're just like, they feel like, you know, there is no dream too big.
Yeah. And it's kind of sad how that magic gets lost along the way. I saw a video the other day, and, like, not to bash on accountants. So, like, if you're an accountant listening to this down the road, like, we need you. Somebody, like, you add value to the world, so please keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. But the guy was like, ask any kindergartner. They're never going to say, I want to grow up to be an accountant. Like, that's a dream you find along the way because it's utilitarian, because it's practical. It's like, is that really what you want to be doing with your life? And so it's kind of a weird thing when you go from being a kid with all these pipe dreams that I made. Like, sometimes they're a pipe dream, you know? It's like, it's not realistic.
Well, and some of them, like, aren't real jobs. Or, like, are just, like, outlandish things that don't exist.
But... Yeah. I remember, I think it was Benjamin, my older brother. He was, like, in our preschool, in order to graduate, you had to, like, write a little paper about like, what do you want to be when you grew up? And me, I was a construction worker. Like, that was my end-all, be-all. Like, dude, I want to do the blue-collar work, And my older brother's like, I want to be a newspaper boy. Or, like, I want to be a mailman. Like, all my brothers just have these whack dreams.
I just want to bike my routes and give people news.
It's like, that's peak existence right there.
That's so funny.
So it's just kind of funny how it fluctuates over time.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love, you know, that always, like, people will, like, when you talk to kids, it's like, sometimes they ask outlandish questions, but then it's like, you have kids that are like, you know, what's your favorite dinosaur? Or what's your third favorite color? And it's like, what is my favorite dinosaur?
That's a great question. Nobody asks you that anymore. It's like, how much more fun would life be if you met someone who's like, hi, my name is Jeff. What's your third favorite color?
Well, because I feel like even, you know, like, in school, like, in college, and, like, meeting people and, like, the dating scene or whatever it is, like, you meet people and it's always like, what's your major? What are you studying? Where are you from? You have the same like, base level conversation with every new person you meet. Yeah. It's like,
which is also tough, because I understand why. Like, because it is kind of the foundation of getting to know someone, and it's just kind of to everyone's disadvantage that those happen to be easy conversation starters, because we're all in the same life situation. We're all college students.
Yeah, it's all what's relevant right now.
Totally. Yeah. It'd be odd if you actually got someone who walks up to you who's like, hey, dude, nice to meet you. What instrument do you play?
Right, yeah, you do that, and then you're the weird guy.
Yeah, totally. But I do agree, life would be a bit more fun like that.
For sure.
Which kind of goes back to this idea that I was thinking of, and I haven't, like, put it into words yet. It's just probably going to sound super terrible, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, too. We're kind of same thing with that. Like, life would be more fun if people were just more, like, chill and just more accepting with the eccentricities of life. Like, if somebody did come up to you and be like, yeah, what's your favorite dinosaur? As opposed to, like, what's your major?
Yeah.
And same stuff with, like, hey, if I want to do a podcast... Like, you may hate podcasts. You may think, like, every white guy in the world has a podcast, and you're just another one. I'm like, yeah, you're totally right there. But, like, if it's bringing happiness or joy or fulfillment into someone's life, then who are we to take a negative...
Yeah. Well, and I think, because there's become... And it's so... I feel like it's so convoluted, too, because it's, like, everyone... You'll hear people be like, oh, everyone should, you know, get to be who you are. Don't let people put you down and stuff. And then we'll immediately turn around and be like, why do you enjoy that?
Yeah, it's like, don't conform. But why aren't you conforming?
Right, but why are you choosing to do things that you like? And, like, why are those the things you choose to like? And I think it's just, there's not so as much, or, like, there needs to be more of a space to just let people not be who, like, necessarily, like, just be who they are, but, like, you know, enjoy things that make them happy, because if they're not bringing harm to anyone else, like, you don't have to understand it.
I don't think the world has anything to lose from another happy person.
No, for sure.
Totally.
That was beautiful.
Case in point, that's going in the podcast. Not taking that line.
That one's being put in quotation.
But like, case in point, I have a buddy, and he's just one of those like very high sarcasm, high cynicism type people, which, albeit sometimes it's kind of fun to hang around those type of people. But but he has this philosophy where, like, if anyone posts something on like their Instagram stories, like, oh, here's my Spotify Wrapped, he'd be like, why did you post this? Like, nobody asked you to post it. It's just like that kind of energy, I feel like, brings people down. It's like, hey, this is something I enjoy. I want to put this out there into the world. But a lot of people don't do it for fear of criticism, which I think just hinders everyone.
Yeah. I would say, because it takes so much confidence and courage to just throw any little piece of yourself or idea or just like interest that you have, and to have someone immediately be like, how dare you do that? It's like,
that's why I don't.
I'll just keep this to myself forever.
Yeah. Which is kind of too bad, because I actually enjoy looking at other people's Spotify Wraps.
Yeah.
Like, what are you into? What are you passionate about? Like, I kind of want to listen to your music too.
Is this the moment in the pod where we pull out our Spotify Wraps?
What is your Spotify Wrap?
I saw that you posted yours.
Yeah. I was like, just because everyone's asking.
Hold on, let me see what
I go for it. I was just telling Mikkel this. I watched a few videos, and I have no idea if this is true, so somebody out there, please fact check this. But I guess last year or something, after like the 2023 Spotify Wrapped came out, Spotify fired a lot of their workforce in charge of Spotify Wrapped, and they went to an AI system. So this year's Spotify Wraps are generated primarily by AI.
Oh, crazy. I know it said there was like an AI.
Thus, the rumor, the theory, the research, or whatever going around is that your Spotify Wrapped is probably incorrect. Like, the AI was tracking things incorrectly. Like, I have a lot of friends who were like, yeah, my top 5 songs shouldn't have been my top 5 songs. Like, I did not listen to this thing 37 times in one day.
See, some of mine are hard because I'm like, I absolutely did that.
Yeah.
But then I also wonder, because I do get surprised sometimes by what my top songs are. And so I'll be like, I wonder how much that affects, like, if it goes more based off like how much you listen to it in a shorter amount of time, or like how much you listen to it in a grand total.
Because it should be a grand total. That's what it sounds like.
It should just be, it should be a constant ranking throughout the year, I feel like.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's interesting because it comes out in like November, December, and then it's like how the shift, and like it's not from January 1st to December.
I know. I always wonder, so like, if I'm listening to Spotify now, like after Spotify Wrapped, but it's still 2024, does that contribute to my 2025 Spotify Wrapped? Or is this like a limbo period where nothing counts?
Yeah, it's like this music just doesn't matter. No.
Yeah, so go ahead. Share your Spotify Wrapped.
Let's see. My top artists were Taylor Swift, second year in a row, Fall Out Boy, Demi Lovato, Kelly Clarkson, and then 5 Seconds of Summer.
Dang, that's like throwing it back, like 2010s. That's classic stuff right there.
My top songs: Goodbye in Our Eyes, Zac Brown Band.
Okay.
Outskirts, Sam Hunt, 15, Taylor's version, Someone Like You, Adele, and Wings by Birdie.
Dope. That's quite the mix right there.
There you go.
So now the big question, do you feel like that's accurate?
I feel like the Taylor Swift and the Fall Out Boy are definitely accurate. I don't know, because I feel like the artists I usually am more behind, whereas like with the songs is usually where I'm like, did I really listen to it that many times? Like, like, don't get me wrong, Goodbye in Our Eyes is a fantastic song, but I'm like, did I really listen to it more than any other song that I listened to all year?
Yeah. It's a little shocking. It's like, I'll show you mine, because I went like 0 for 5 on what I would have predicted for my top 5 songs, which leads me to believe that the AI was doing something funky for me.
Yeah.
But
I also feel like there's this space where I'm like, am I just thinking because these, like, the songs that I'm listening to right now, or like the ones I'm playing on repeat, are more relevant? So it's like I'm not remembering just how much I listened to it in the beginning of the year.
That's very kind of have a recency bias. Yeah.
Which I do appreciate that they show the like your changes.
Oh, the trends over time. That was pretty cool. If it's accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is me. My top 5 artists, I think, makes sense. So John Bellion, he's been number 1 for me for however long I've ever had Spotify. Number 2, this one was kind of funny, but Big Bad Voodoo Daddy.
Okay.
It's like this big band revival. It's just like fun, jazzy instruments, and it's honestly a good time. But I wouldn't have guessed that would have been my top 5. But I don't know. I guess I listen to a lot of their stuff. I like my big band music. 3, Louis Vuitton, if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Number 4, Jake, like JVKE. Then number 5, Nick D, I guess, which I wouldn't have guessed that one either.
Snake D, he has a TikTok page.
I'm not on TikTok, but I think he does. He works a lot with Connor Price.
Hold on, I'm just gonna pull up the picture and we're gonna verify this real quick.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, but then my top 5 songs, I wouldn't have guessed any of these. Like, I'm a Believer from Shrek. Like,
That's you.
Yeah, it's the guy, Nick D. Great Balls of Fire. Maybe that one makes sense. But yeah, it's just like, I would not have guessed any of those for my top 5. So I can see if people are claiming that the Spotify AI was in charge of figuring out your rank, then it very well could be inaccurate. I would believe those claims.
I feel like there's definitely a space for it to be inaccurate. I do wonder though also how much like the time like because they put together like the minutes that you spent listening to it, how much that affects it too. Because I don't know what yours was, but mine was like over 50,000 minutes.
No way.
Were spent listening to music this year.
Like how many exactly?
I think it was 50. Hold on.
That's solid. Because my family had like a small little competition where it's like, who listened to it the most? My older brother Benjamin got it with, I think it was 56,000.
Nice.
Yeah, Mikkel had a friend. What does she have? Like 70-something thousand?
Here.
You should pull that up higher?
50,045 minutes.
Okay. You barely broke 50.
Barely broke 50.
Congratulations.
A busy year.
Yeah, dude, 158,000 minutes? That's 7 hours a day, right? Was that the math we did?
Yeah.
That's insane. How do you even have Spotify on that much?
I feel like a lot of it is because this year I found my iPod. So, because I listen to music and like when I go to sleep. And so I feel like that's a lot of it too, where there are a lot of people who will like listen to music to sleep or like will fall asleep to a podcast or something. And I feel like that might be where that extra time is coming in.
Huh.
Because then if I wasn't using my iPod and I was using Spotify, I feel like the time would have been way more.
Yeah.
Because, you're sleeping for like, well, you're supposed to be sleeping for like 8 hours a night.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, if you're playing music throughout the night.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I can't remember how I used Spotify for this, but back in the day, I used to fall asleep to like crackling fire, like ASMR. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
ASMR.
Yeah.
Whatever that stands for. But yeah, so if you're putting on stuff like that in the background to sleep, I guess you could rack up the hours.
I feel like it's something sensory.
I've always wondered what that stands for. What is it? And it is ASMR?
ASMR. Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response.
Would not have guessed that.
A tingling sensation that typically begins on the scalp and moves down the neck and spine.
Huh.
There you go. Is that what crackling fires does to you?
I guess so. Would never explain it like that, but yeah, it's either that or like you connect your phone to like your work speaker, so you play like the vibey lobby music.
Oh yeah.
So it's on for like 7-8 hours a day.
That makes sense. Or if you use it, depending on what your job is, or if like you use it at school or something.
Yeah, I don't know how you get that much otherwise though. That's crazy. And for me, my podcasts had like a separate minute count.
Oh yeah.
And I think I had like 5,000 minutes for podcasts.
That's what I had. My friend Travis was like, because he's a podcast guy, where like he listens to them. He doesn't have one, but he was like, how much is your podcast minute? I was like, maybe 4 minutes. Like I think the New Heights podcast and the Drama Queens podcast are the only two that I've ever listened to.
What are those about?
New Heights is the Kelsey brothers doing football, and amongst other things. And then Drama Queens is the 3 like main female actors from the TV show One Tree Hill have gone back and like are watching the show. And so they'll watch the show and then get on their podcast and like talk about it. And they'll talk about like the production or like stories from when they were around filming and like different stuff where they're like viewing it now because they this has been 15 years or so since they were like really in that world.
That's actually a really cool podcast idea. Like if you're really into a TV show and like the TV show ends and like you crave more content, you're in like that weird limbo space again. Mm-hmm. Like, are you familiar with the TV show Psych?
Yes, I love Psych.
Me and my brothers are obsessed with that. Like we grew up watching it. It's like the old staple in the family. But like there's 8 seasons and we've seen every episode like 16 times at this point. So I like if Sean and Gus made a podcast and just talked about, oh yeah, this is what happened in this episode and like this thing occurred and like this is how I felt and
whatever this too. Where they're like, this is where we were in our lives, like, when we're filming it, and this is, like, all the people, like, involved in filming it. Because they'll have guests that were either, like, also on the show or, like, crew members and stuff like that.
Totally.
But, yeah. I listen to it to be like, how did you feel about this story arc or this scene?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this is how I felt about it.
That's interesting because then it adds more depth to it. Like the next time you go watch that episode, and now you have more knowledge about how the actors
You're
would
like,
do.
this is the work that they actually put into it. Yeah.
It's so fun. It's like
Super fun.
the classic meme of you've probably seen the Lord of the Rings movies, right?
I definitely have.
It's like when Aragorn kicks the helmet. Isn't he's
Yeah.
like, oh, did you know?
Like that was real.
He broke his toe when he kicked that helmet. It's like, oh, whoa.
It's one of my favorite things to look back and look at, like what character breaks or like improv moments were kept in.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's what makes good movies so much better. It's like there is that realness to it because either they've taken the creative license to just to understand the character and make a like artistic decision, or it just is like what a character breaks and it's funny.
Totally. And it makes it way more iconic. And it makes sense, even from like a writing perspective. Like if I'm a writer for a movie or a show, I probably understand the characters and the character dynamics to a reasonable extent. But like an actor who plays the character probably understands them infinitely times better. So therefore, it just makes logical sense that they would know what the character should and would say in a given scenario.
Well, and I feel like it kind of marks, depending on what the work that they're creating is, it marks kind of a good director or author or so and so that like is able to kind of let go of that control and have somebody come in and like, this is the character breakdown that I've written, and then the actor will take it and kind of think, like you said, like think about it and try to make that a real person and a real character because they are having to like become that person.
Yeah. And I've heard instances where that happens. Like I know, oh my gosh, somebody's gonna make fun of me because I can't remember his name. Who's the guy that plays Luke Skywalker? Is it Mark Hamilton?
Hamill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with the previous conversation topic of Hamilton.
Yes.
Mark Hamill.
You were so close, but
thank you. I'll take it. But yeah, I heard that when the script writers came to him saying like, hey, your character's going to do this. He's like, my character would never do that.
Yeah.
So we're not doing that.
Yeah. It's like, this wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah. And that's cool. Like he's in tune with his character enough to add more reality to the story.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like it adds kind of an accountability too, where you get, in certain movies, you'll get so, like, oh, we've created this, but this is where we want to go with it. And I feel like you see it a lot in TV shows too, where it's like, they're either, that's how you like lose the character development in certain things where you're like, they did all of this to end up here, and then all of a sudden we just like took a weird direction turn. And this is what we have now. And to have an actor be like, I don't think that this is what happened. Yeah,
to kind of keep it in check.
Yeah.
I heard the same thing with Henry Cavill. Is that how do you pronounce his last name?
I think it's Cavill.
Okay, cool. Well, I've heard the same thing that he does. When he was in The Witcher, a TV show that I haven't seen, but I heard it's pretty successful. But he's like on set reading comics, so he knows what his character would and would not do in certain situations, and then he can give feedback.
He was getting really background in that, and he's a gigantic nerd, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, which is so funny because he's such a hunk of a man, and he's so knowledgeable about all these nerdy topics. It's kind of cool.
Honestly, I haven't watched it. I heard that it was really good, but me and Lizzie, my best friend, have a deal where, because she'll like watch a show and like she'll let me know if she thinks I would really like it, but she'll also warn me if there's like a bunch of nudity or like swear words in it and stuff, because she knows like that's not really,
you have the adult filter in a human being.
that's where our friendship balances out, where it's like she knows my standards as like an LDS member, and then she will like take those and be like, all right, maybe you shouldn't watch this, or like,
that's cool of her.
Here are the places you should skip forward.
Interesting point. You mentioned how characters sometimes take like a sudden turn in their development. It's something I've noticed a lot in series, whether it's been like a movie franchise or a TV show, that the characters start out pretty nuanced. Like, for example, take Kung Fu Panda. Like, there's actually so much character dimension to him. He experiences so much character growth. And then the most recent movie, have you seen it, Kung Fu Panda 4?
I have not. I've seen, because that's the one that just came out. Yeah, no, I haven't seen that one.
All good. In my humble opinion, it was entertaining, but the one beef I have with it is that it undoes all the character development that he's kind of gone through. And on top of that, it veers his character towards a more simplistic view. Like, he used to be this very nuanced guy who like cared about family, was also the Dragon Warrior, but struggling with insecurity, and like this whole complex thing. And then he kind of goes back to being like the dumb, the selfish, just a very two-dimensional
Yeah.
version of himself.
See, and I feel like that's where I have such a struggle with sequels and continuations and stuff like that, where you have this, because you see it so much. Like, you have this amazing Kung Fu Panda was a fire movie,
Yeah.
and like even the second one was like, it was so good.
Yeah.
But then you get to like the third one, and you're like, okay, it was good, but like it doesn't have the same like power that the first two have.
We're starting to lose the character development.
Yeah.
We're starting to lose the nuance behind the character.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I feel like because 4 came out so much. I mean, I don't actually remember when 3 came out, but it's been several years since the 2 came out, and you kind of lose. I feel like that disconnect also is where you lose some of that character nuance and like development.
But a lot of time passes. I wonder if they even have the same writers. They may have.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Well, because I know, and writers especially, because I know that was one of the things with like the Wizards of Waverly Place TV show on Disney was like the first and second seasons were so different than the third season because they got a new writer and ended up taking it in a completely different direction, and that's why people were like, why have we done all of this where like all the love triangles and stuff. But yeah, going back to it, was like sequels are really hard for me, and also in like with The Hobbit or Harry Potter or Mockingjay kind of things, when they split into so many parts, because like that's almost always entirely a monetary decision.
Oh yeah.
Where like, if we break this up into a whole other 3-hour movie, we can get the ticket sales and the rights and all of this stuff. And like The Hobbit is one book. Like, it did not need to be 3 movies long.
Yeah.
I mean, they were substantially good movies, but it was like all of this could have happened
in a single movie, and it would have been a fun, action-packed movie.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I can see why they do it. Of course, like it's always money,
right?
But from the audience perspective, you know how fun it would be if they stayed true to the book and it's just action-packed and thrilled and true to the narrative. Like the whole love story between the dwarf and the elf lady. I feel bad, I don't know anybody's names.
So it's Killian. I can't ever remember her
That
name.
sounds about right. But yeah, like that never happened in the book, and a lot of fans were upset at that.
Yeah. You don't even get me started on.
You got a whole soapbox to stand on.
Yeah, the Divergent series alone, I could talk for so long about how they messed up that.
I had to turn off the second movie.
It was terrible. I never even watched the third one, and then I was doing research. I ended up like reading about the production and stuff, and found out they were supposed to make a fourth one.
Oh.
That ended up not making it out of production.
Got too much hate.
Yeah, because everyone was like, this was terrible. Like,
not interested.
They've taken the entire story and just completely changed it.
Yeah. Which is always kind of too bad, because I feel bad, because it is some director, some producer, some writer's dream to like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make a movie, I'm going to have a successful series, and then the fans don't like it. But at the same time, I don't really have too much pity on them, just because it is natural selection. Like, if you did a little fan service, if you did a little research.
Well, and there also is such a, when you take a work or a storyline that already exists and you're going to adapt it into a different media, it is important to, like there are certain things you can change because, these are real people you have to cast. So sometimes, like with, Daniel Radcliffe and Harry Potter, like his eyes aren't the right color. And they even tried to get him to wear colored contacts, and then he had a reaction to them and like couldn't.
Oh.
And so it's like,
know that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
But so it's like, there are some things it's like, you have to give and take a little bit, because it's like, okay, their hair is blonde, not brown, but they embody the character so well.
Yeah.
But there is also like the actual story and the content of the original work is important to maintain throughout.
Yeah. With Harry Potter, they consulted J.K. Rowling throughout the whole process, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, she was. When I say that, like I was involved. From what I like read about it and stuff, she was pretty involved in this, like the script writing and the casting decisions.
Yeah, which I think is an excellent model for other people to follow. Like, hey, if there's literature, go get the author, get their consent whenever you do stuff on film, just so that way you're getting the OG source of wisdom. Yeah,
you're at least being influenced by the right sources.
Yeah,
where you're not like, because there are certain times where like a fan cast is important because you want to take into account what fans would like to see, but you also like you have to make sure that you're not just driven by the popular decision. But yeah,
it's a tough line to toe.
Yeah, it is rough.
Yeah. One other movie that I had serious beef with Michaela and I watched the first Incredibles, and they were like, "Oh yeah, let's go watch the second Incredibles right after this because the first one's fire. It's so good.
It's so good."
And I think we got about like 20 minutes into the second one, and I had to turn it off.
Really?
Once again, back to that whole character development thing where I feel like Bob Parr went through this huge character arc of like, who am I if not a superhero? And then you realize, like, you know what? Family's most important. And then come the second one, he's like, who am I if not a superhero? Like, and then like, he rediscovers the same story. Like,
yeah, it happens differently because it's not so much like, oh, it's been taken from me. It's like, oh, my wife gets to do it instead. Where it's like, oh, I'm missing out.
Yeah, which I get there's like a slight different angle, but like you had
at its core, it's the same story.
Yeah, you had over a decade of time to work on a cool plot line. You came up with almost something of the exact same in terms of the character arc. So I don't know. It was just frustrating. It felt awkward, and which is tough because the first time I watched Incredibles 2, I hadn't watched the first one in so long. So it's like, oh, solid movie, entertaining.
Yeah.
But then it's interesting to then compare, like watch the first one, then immediately watch the second one, and it is not the same.
Well, and I
think
quality. Yeah, and I think, and it's so difficult too because with all of the remakes and the like live action remakes that Disney's coming out and stuff, it's like, can we just have an original story? Like, because to a certain extent, you know, a lot of different works are going to be similar in their topics and stuff because that's just how archetype works. But also, it's just like, we don't have to have 14 versions of the same movie.
Yeah. Like I saw a post the other day where it's like, the biggest movies upcoming in 2025. And it's like Shrek 5, Monsters Inc. 4, Toy Story 17. Like,
Mission Impossible 84.
Yeah, it's like, come on, guys.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, because I feel like with the Disney remakes too, it's difficult because like sometimes they try to make it like a little too modern, I feel like. Where it's like we're trying to please a lot of different people instead of just like making the story what's important. Because I feel like I don't know how true it is, but I read a thing that was like with the Snow White remake that is coming out.
Oh yeah.
They were like, there's not
with Gal Gadot.
And Rachel Zegler, I think is her name. But she was like, the prince isn't going to be super, like, the love story is not going to be really in the movie, and it's not going to be, you know, really be involved. That's not what the story's about.
Very different.
And we were like, that's quite literally what the story's about, and if you change it that much, it's just like, well, why would you even call it Snow White like that?
Which is tough because I'm honestly all for an artistic rendition of something. Like, I think it can be fun if done well.
No, for sure.
But once again, like, you got to toe the line of staying true to the source material. And if you're going to make a spin off of that source material, maybe just make it an own original work at that point.
Right. Because,
call it something different. I don't know.
Because I'm a girl who has seen probably every version of a Cinderella story that's ever been made.
Yeah.
Even when they suck, I watched them, you know? But also it's like that is a callback to, obviously, like, it's based on the Cinderella story, but we're not calling it a remake. We're not being like, oh, we're taking this movie and we're making it live action. Yeah. But yeah.
Are you pretty big into like the Disney-esque princess genre?
I mean, I guess yes. I don't really know how to
Not really.
Well, like, yes, as in, like, I enjoy the Disney movies. I've seen all of them.
Gotcha.
So I guess the answer to that question would be yes.
So just specifically very interested in the Cinderella story.
No, I honestly couldn't give you a reason why. Like, Cinderella's not my favorite.
I've happened to see.
I just happen to, like, every time one comes out, I'm like, I'm gonna watch it. Okay. Like, I feel like at this point it's kind of become like a bit, or I'm just like, well, I've seen the other 9. I might as well.
I guess this is who I am now.
Yeah,
keep the ball rolling.
You have to watch them, but not the Camila Cabello one, because that was horrible.
Really?
It was really bad.
I feel like I heard a whisper of that at some point, and then completely forgot about it. So this is like the second time I've ever heard that.
Well, there you go. It was really terrible.
Was it? That's too bad.
It takes a lot to make Idina Menzel sound bad, and they did it. So
hats off to them.
I guess
you did the impossible.
It was
for the worst.
Yeah, like, even then it was like, she obviously sounded amazing because she's a Broadway star, and she just can't do wrong. But just the musical production, they really did everybody in that dirty.
Yeah,
because there were so many things where it's like, that couldn't have been the only time, like the only one that they could have put in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But they just left it. And like, you couldn't have re-recorded that?
It's kind of an interesting trend too, where you get, in essence, actors who want to be pop stars and pop stars that want to be actors. I feel like nobody's content in whatever world that they're in. And once again, like, I'm all for like cross collaboration. They're like, hey, if you want to get into acting, go get into acting. Like, that's up to you. But if you're forcing your hand and consequently the product that you're releasing is worse than it would have been otherwise, like, that's where I'm having issues. Like, I know a lot of people were upset when Emma Watson was cast as Beauty and the Beast, and I feel like there are dozens of examples of.
Oh, so yeah, I know there was a lot of that, especially the like influencer, TikToker kind of stuff, where it's like a lot of them like that when they did the alternate remake of She's All That with the Addison Rae.
Oh.
And it was like, everyone was like, why is she in that? And it was terrible, and it's because she's not an actress. And she's like, you run into a lot of like, okay, are we doing this just because people know who she is, or like because she actually has an interest in acting?
Yeah. And that's the other thing, that I feel like whenever a new movie is released, it's always like the same 6 names.
Yeah.
It's like Ryan Reynolds, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Gal Gadot, like.
Yeah. And like, obviously you need big names to draw people to the movie, but but sometimes it's like, okay, but were they of everybody who auditioned, were they the best choice for the role?
Yeah. No, that's tough. And I also feel bad because I know that there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of like up and coming amazing talent.
No, for sure.
Who would have killed the role and would have set them on a track for stardom. But then we keep casting Sydney Sweeney and everything. So it's like.
Who is an amazing actress, but there's also, there's like, we could. Like, who else could we get?
We could stir the pot a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think all of that just comes into, like, just there needs to be kind of a revitalization of just ideas in general.
Yeah. Which is tough because it's kind of a negative feedback loop. I feel bad, but there was this guy that I was talking to, I'd have been like a year ago now, and he's just like a weird, quirky guy. I was like, hey, like, what are you doing in Provo for? He's like, oh, I'm studying like screenwriting. Like, I want to be a screenwriter. I was like, oh, really? Like, we need good writers in there. He's like telling me some of his concepts for screenwriting, and I could just tell, like, you're just going to exacerbate the issue, dude.
Right. You're like, well, because there's on the one hand, you're like, okay, well, I've seen this, like, all of these are the same, but then you're like, I'm not into any of these new ideas that are coming out. Like, if you write that movie, no one's going to go see it.
Yeah. And it's just tough because, like, a poor system is rarely going to attract like new good talent. For example, like take journalism. Like journalism's credibility has kind of been like questioned over the last few years. So now, like, if you're a talented individual, why would you go into journalism at this point? Because if you recognize that, I guess corrupted, it's lost trustworthiness, it's lost credibility. It needs good people, sure, but like, I'm going to apply myself elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's that negative feedback loop in the sense that the worse that they do, the less people are motivated to join them. Right. Less quality content that they can attract.
No, that's a good point.
So it's going to take a revolutionary mind to, like, I'm going to turn this place around, step in, write something amazing, and
for sure,
maybe gain the credibility back.
It's going to blow everyone's mind.
Maybe it could be you, Lily.
Oh, it could not be me.
I apply your office skills all day, but I'm honestly, I feel like if people are writing this stuff and they're air quotes succeeding, you can knock it out of the park.
I do feel like with the world of like self-publishing and just the way you can, there's so many different production studios to make almost anything. It's like you can self-produce it or self-publish books, you can self-produce music and movies and stuff like that. There's like, there is a lot more of that, like, well, if it's available, I'm going to do it. Yeah. Which is cool. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes it does not work out well.
That's true. I remember being super impressed by this guy in high school who, like, dude, I'm a published author. And he, like, showed me his book on Amazon. I was like, no way, dude. Like, how'd you do that? And to me, it's mind-blowing. Yeah. And then he, like, gave me a copy of the book, and it looked like a 6-year-old child wrote it. It's about, like, why the state of Jefferson needs to, like, secede from California or something. I was like, it has the verbiage of a 5th grader, and it, I don't know, it wasn't as bad as I expected, but it kind of opened my eyes to this world of, you could self-publish, you could make your own music, you could do all this stuff. Like, it's all at your fingertips, which is for sure, which is actually really cool.
And I think opportunity. And when it works, when you are able to discover an artist that like you wouldn't otherwise be able to discover, or an author that wrote a book that you were just like, this is amazing. it's like, yeah, you see the value in it, but then you also get people like a guy I went to high school with has become, I think the official title is a fitness coach or a personal trainer kind of person. Except he's kind of turned, somebody once told him that he looks like Aristotle, I think it was. And that's kind of become his entire personality. And he just like really doesn't even seem like a real person anymore. He just,
well, is that just his online presence or is that his in person?
I don't know.
Because that's the thing. I know a lot of these people like put up facades on the internet and then in person they're actually really chill people.
Well, I mean, I knew him in school. I mean, like, not super well, but...
Was he still kind of eccentric, though, like back then?
Yeah. I mean, like, it would, like you said, it's like, I haven't seen him or spoken to him in years, so it could very much all be just in, this is what works, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And in part, I think at the beginning, it kind of feels now that he's lost a little bit of touch with reality.
Yeah.
And he self-published I guess you would call it a self-help book if we're going to categorize it that way. And so naturally, I downloaded it and was like, I have to see what you have to say about it.
How was it?
It was horrible. It was really bad. And like,
that's a tough genre to write into because you need so much ethos and like practical stories to actually have a persuasive argument.
Well, and it was like maybe 18 pages long. Like it was not very long.
It was a pamphlet.
It was a really bad PowerPoint presentation, basically. It was just like him talking about the need to like better yourself and work out and be regimented and have all of this and this, except like in the mindset of ancient Rome. Which is the noise I made when I read it. Because it was,
and that's my review.
It was just really interesting. It was like there was nothing to be gained from this. Like it really didn't give anybody any tips or anything.
Gotcha.
So,
which is interesting because, like, harkening back to our very first point of like, hey, man, if that's bringing you happiness by publishing that stuff, by all means, freaking go for it.
For sure,
100% supportive.
And it's one of those things too, where it's like I could sit here and be like, I felt like that was terrible and ridiculous, but also like that doesn't mean that I'm just out here spewing gold either.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's like he's clearly successful in it in his own way, and if that is working for him, go ahead.
That's the crazy thing. There is an audience for just about everything. And going back to like the Spotify rap, just seeing everyone's artists, everyone's top songs. I'm like, I haven't heard of 80% of these, and I would consider myself to be a pretty like well-rounded listener. I don't peg myself just to one genre. I listen like I don't know. I'm up for anything.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy that all these hundreds of artists who I've never heard of are making it. They have a following by these individuals.
No, for sure. I feel like every time you discover somebody and then you realize that they actually are pretty big.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's crazy. Like you had no idea that they were out there in the world.
There's thousands of them. There's an audience for everything, including ancient Roman-inspired self-help books.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's working for somebody, and I'm glad that they found what they needed.
Gotcha. You ever find it like inspiring? Like, hey, if these people are finding these like crazy niches of life to go produce content in, do you find that inspiring at all? Like, oh, maybe I'll try my hand at that.
It really depends on what is being produced. I feel like because I feel like there are some circumstances where you're, whether it be with podcasts or books or whatever it may be, that you're like, okay, well, you don't, just because you can say whatever you want doesn't mean that you should.
Yeah.
Not all thoughts are meant to be shared. But
that's the other tough line to walk.
Yeah.
Like, between pushing out content and finding joy in what you're doing, but also realizing that not everything needs to be shared.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain beauty and value in self-censorship. And just recognizing that, like, being edgy or being different or being noticed isn't always a good thing.
Yeah. I always love those comments in Instagram where it's that gif of, like, we should know less about each other.
Well, and I feel like, I know you said you weren't on TikTok, but every once in a while, you'll come across a video and it's like you cannot waterboard that information out of me. And you are just sitting here freely telling this story as if nobody else could, like, use it against you. And I feel like funny. That's one of those things where it's like, it is nice that there's more of a space to talk about things and, be open and have conversations about different topics or issues or just struggles that people have. But also there are things where it's like, okay, but maybe there is value in keeping some stuff just to yourself.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I really respect people who have that sense of discretion.
Mm-hmm.
I think John Bellion's one of those individuals who made his music, made his millions of dollars, and then dropped out of the limelight and doesn't even care to go back in it.
Oh, really?
In his lyrics, he talks about, no, I'm just happy. I just want to spend time with my wife and my family. I don't really care to please anyone anymore.
Yeah.
I did what I came here to do, and I did it. I'm gone. Whereas other people, they get stuck in that loop of I made $1 million, but I want 100 million.
Mm-hmm.
And then make 100 million. It's but I want 1 billion. And you're never satisfied. You keep trying to go bigger, go bigger, bigger, go bigger, and then you crash out.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like too, there's such a, being famous is not all it's cracked up to be, and you can see that in almost any person who has attention. And so you get those people who, are out here oh, I sit here and I crave the attention, and that is what has drawn me to this world. But then you also look at just different celebrities and stuff, and just watch there is zero privacy in their lives at all, and just watching how desensitized the world has been to just invading personal moments of other people's lives, and it's kind of crazy.
Yeah,
and
that's so sad.
Yeah, I definitely have respect for people who are who are not only want to stay out of the limelight, but also have found the way to do that and still do what they love.
Yeah, I think there's huge maturity in that. Mm-hmm. It's probably the right place to be. I mean, not that I'm famous, but once again, John Bellion has this cool song. I'll just share some of the lyrics with you. But it's called New York Soul, Part 2. And he says, "Let me give the kids just a little help. Tell them money is not the key to wealth. Because if it can stop the pain, how do you explain a bunch of millionaires that killed themselves?" Mm-hmm. Et cetera, et cetera. It keeps going. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just that's powerful from a guy that does have millions of dollars to say, money's not what stops the pain. Right. People still crash out. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, there's so much it's there's also so much of that, the attention can be positive, and there can be that positive feedback from an audience, but then there's also once that criticism turns or that popularity turns to obsession and stuff, it's that is also a struggle, because then it's there are celebrities that have died because of obsession or invasion of privacy kind of stuff.
Really?
Yeah. And Princess Diana is a perfect example of that. And and you get so many other people where it's being in the limelight has either driven them to have a negative mental health with their audience, mm-hmm. because it's all this criticism is really getting to me.
Yeah. Or the expectations, mm-hmm. you are so pretty, you're so kind, and then it's right. If I don't live up to that, I'm going to disappoint everyone. They only love me because I am pretty, mm-hmm.
Yeah, or everyone is watching, so the second I step one foot out of this perceived box, mm-hmm. that I've been put in, then it's right. Oh, you're immediately being turned into something that is being blown out of context or out of proportion.
It was really interesting. I took an art history class at mm-hmm. BYU, and we got to the age of pop art, which, once again, my humble opinion, I'm not a huge fan. I'm a big fan of the huge, cool masterpieces that took dozens of hundreds of hours mm-hmm. to paint. But you've probably seen the Marilyn diptych. It's Marilyn Monroe and all these different neon colors.
Oh, yeah.
And it slowly fades the more you print it. And this was just my art teacher's explanation. I don't know if this was, I think it was Andy Warhol that painted it. I could be terribly misstating what I learned in that class.
Let's see if we can fact check it.
Yeah, we can fact check it. That's why we invented the internet.
That's what I use. People make fun of me for it all the time, because if I don't know something, I'll be like, oh, I don't know, and I'll pull up my phone.
Oh, it was Andy Warhol. Look at that.
There you go.
Marilyn diptych. Nailed it. My art history professor would be proud. High five.
He retained information.
But yeah, so he was saying that the interpretation of that painting is that you have Marilyn Monroe, and the first painting mm-hmm. is very fresh, clean, crisp, and then it slowly deteriorates the more renditions are done.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be symbolic of how Marilyn Monroe was this nuanced, complex, holistic individual with hopes, dreams, desires. Mm-hmm. But then the limelight, the fame, the expectations killed her and removed who she really was. And Marilyn Monroe's not even her real name. Mm-mm. What is it? Something.
I don't remember, but I know that was a
real name. Yeah, Norma Jean Mortensen. Yeah, that's what he's saying. It's the painting here is teaching that what happened to Norma. Mm-hmm. She became Marilyn, and then she faded out.
Well, that's what, have you seen, I don't remember who was recounting the story, but they were walking, like they were out with Marilyn Monroe, and she was just like walking around being like nobody was noticing that that's who she was, and she wasn't getting recognized and stuff, and it was like blowing their mind because they were like, how, like she's such an icon. And then she was like, like, do you want to see the change? And she just like instantly just there was a weird internal instant change, and then people started to notice her and were like, oh,
like just by the way she carried herself.
Yeah, she just like there was some change in her demeanor and her air that she just became Marilyn Monroe instead of just, a person walking around town.
That's crazy. It like really is another person.
Yeah.
It's like a mild case of schizophrenia. That's kind of crazy. But like on a micro scale, I kind of felt the same thing. When I went to Brazil and learned Portuguese, I associated Portuguese with like a new identity.
Really?
Like when I speak Portuguese with people, my extroversion shoots way up. Whereas when I speak English, like I'm a bit more of a casual tempered guy.
Yeah.
So I kind of get that on like a micro scale.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely kind of like you said, it was like that speaking Portuguese is like your way of reinventing.
Yeah.
Not like completely, being like, oh, I have to become a new person, but it's like that's an aspect of you that gets to be a little different.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's one of those things too that, you see it, people talk about it all the time, where it's like, the person that you are with your family or with your friends or with, your significant other, that's like not all of, like, they're all you, but you act differently around some of those people depending on the situation, just out of either respect for, your parents because they are your parents, or just because the conversation you have with your friends is going to be way more casual.
Yeah. Which is kind of weird in the sense that your idea of yourself is not the same as anyone else's idea of like who is Lilly Gibson. Like, it's not a crazy thought.
It really is crazy. I really try not to think about it because I don't know that
it makes me like upset. Like my perspective of you is not who you think you are. It's not who your mom thinks you are. It's not who your friend Lizzie thinks you are.
There's like
that there's so much more depth to this character than what I see.
Well, I feel like that's just so one of the intricate and interesting parts about just being human is it's like there's so many different aspects to people's personalities and to, like you said, like who a person is at their core, that just like you're constantly getting to uncover those things and know those things as you meet people or just become better friends with people.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the theory that there was like a list of 30-ish questions that if you truly spend the time to ask someone these questions and like have a good conversation, that you can't help but love them in like the fraternal manner?
That's interesting.
I have no idea if that's like peer reviewed double blind research or anything.
Yeah.
But I understand the sentiment behind it, to where if you truly get to know an individual, you can't help but love them on that, like, I understand you, I know how you feel, and I appreciate you and I value you and I can,
Well, and that's what I love. Like, it's almost exactly the same idea, but I think, hold on, I have to fact check. It's a Marjorie Hinckley quote.
Oh, cool.
Where she's like, there isn't a person you wouldn't love if you could read their story.
There it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it just, because then I feel like that kind of going back to what we were saying about just like, not attacking people for just sharing the things that they enjoy. And if, it's like you get that all the time where you're like, oh, this person was rude to me, or, that person seems closed off, or, whatever it may be. And then you come to find out like, oh, this is what was happening in their day. And that's why, we had this awkward interaction, or like, this is why, this happened. And it puts so much more into perspective when the other side of things.
Yeah. It always stems from something else, which is really mind opening. Like over time, I've heard the phrase or idea that like, hey, bullies are only bullies because someone's bullying them, or some variation thereof. And I just took that with a grain of salt. But the more I've like gotten to know people, the more I totally think that's true. Like, hey, if somebody's arrogant, it's actually because they're insecure, or if somebody's rude, it's actually because they are impatient with themselves. Like all these different things that they're struggling with it internally. But then they're externally manifested. And so it's kind of rash of us to judge people for those external behaviors when there's an internal storm raging within themselves.
Well, and I think there's just so much, like, there are very few people who just at their core suck, like who just aren't pleasant people to be around.
Like the Adolf Hitlers of the world? Like that kind of suck, or like less?
Just, I mean, like that also works as an example. But just like, but yeah, it's like, just even in a, kind of not to be preachy, but in kind of like a religious way, where it's like, there are very few just like completely evil people.
No.
Because, like, I do believe that those people exist.
Mm-hmm.
But
no, I totally agree. But yeah, I think 99-ish% of people are good.
Right. That is like there are. That's like, yeah, the people who seem to be bad, or, you know, like the bullies and stuff, that it's like there is almost always something behind it. Yeah. Whether that justifies their actions to you or not, you know, it's like it is easier to understand their actions and forgive people when you know what the cause of it is.
And that's the thing. I don't know if it justifies it as much as gives you grounds for a more loving response to the behavior.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's important because I feel like I've had that conversation with a lot of my friends with being like, you know, having a reason for something doesn't justify, you know, continuing the actions and stuff. And that it's like, just because I understand where it's coming from doesn't mean that you get to just, you know, continue being rude or being mean or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But it also, like you said, it's like it helps the way that you respond to it, and helps you, you know, if that person's open to changing that behavior, it helps you to have the patience to help them do that.
Yeah. Like, I have a professor this semester who, and generally, I actually really like my professors. I understand that being a professor took a lot of hard work. I really respect you. Like, thank you for coming down and teaching us. But this professor, man, I don't get along with him.
Yeah.
He's an incredibly smart guy. My only issue with him is that he knows that. Right. He knows he's an incredibly smart guy. And yeah, so he comes across as a little insensitive, a little arrogant, loves to give unsolicited advice. And so throughout the semester, I've just kind of built up this, like, not hatred, but just like attention. Like, I don't like you. I want to get out of this class. I'm not vibing with it. And then he said in class the other day, we had to take, have you ever heard of the OCEAN assessments? Like
I've heard of them.
It's like a big 5 personality trait thing. They all stand for something, like conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism.
Yeah.
And neuroticism means tendency to like second guess yourself or have high anxiety. And he said in class the other day that he scores really high in neuroticism. And I was like, wait, really? You? Like, you come across as like Mr. Ego. But then I was like, that makes sense.
Right.
You know, because if you do have high neuroticism, you're probably going to try to mask the insecurity as best you can.
Right. You're constantly trying to make sure that you are at your best at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not that like alleviated, at least not 100% of my like beef with him. But I was like, you know what? I get it. I can be more patient with him. I can be more understanding. I can be more kind.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, I mean, I'm a 100% believer, like, you do not, like, everybody does not have to like you, and you do not have to like everybody. It's just, that's just the way that personalities work. You know, there are some personalities that you just do not mesh with, and that's okay. But it also, you know, that doesn't justify you to treat people like trash, or to, you know, just completely disregard the fact that those people are human beings. Because I feel like there needs to be, even if you, and kind of like you were saying with your professor, like, even though you aren't gonna, you know, he's not necessarily going to be your first pick for another one of his classes or something. You still have respect for the fact that he is a professional, and he is a person, and he, you know, like, everybody is flawed.
Yeah. I think I had a good discussion with Mason about this on the first podcast, and we have listened to that part about how no matter what, you can always be kind. Like, you may not like them, you may not agree with them, you may have tension or beef with them, but no matter what, you can always be kind. And I think that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, for sure. Because, yeah, actions and words that are quiet are always heard a lot more, and always have a lot more impact than things that are yelled.
That's true. That's true. What's that good quote? I think it stemmed from, like, some Catholic priest back in the day. But he was like, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Which I think is another way of saying just actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that for sure.
Well, on a totally random note, I pulled up one of my least favorite Christmas songs of all time.
Which one is
it? Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time.
Oh, okay.
Which I guess is actually just Wonderful Christmas Time. And people may hate me for hating on Paul McCartney.
I'm with you. Like, I would never put it on myself.
And yet it's always on.
Yeah.
Like, anytime you go to a Christmas radio, I was in Walmart the other day and it came on.
Yeah.
And it's like a big meme between me and my younger brother where it's like, if he could make it big, I can make it big.
I can do it.
And of course, like, he made a lot of great music besides this, but like, just listen to the lyrics. The mood is right. The spirit's up. We're here tonight. and that's enough. That doesn't even rhyme. Simply having a wonderful Christmas. And that's like the whole song. That's the whole song. It's like, the party is on, the feeling's here, that only comes this time of year. It's like the most uncreative melody.
Well,
the wackest lyrics, and yet it's huge. People love it.
Well, I feel like you can always tell a song that was written, like, that is in essence a jiggle. You know, like, it was written to be catchy and to catch the feeling of the season. And
the feeling of the season is da-dun-da-dun.
Yeah, it's
da-dun-da-dun.
It's a happy melody that, is just you're supposed to bob your head to, and it's supposed to get stuck in your head. It's essentially elevator music, I think.
Maybe he's more of a genius than I've given him credit for. Maybe he knew something I didn't.
I don't know. But I agree with you that it is, like you can only hear the line simply having a wonderful Christmas time so many times before you're like, all right, there could have been different words here.
Totally. But it goes back to the point. There's an audience for everything.
There is.
You could write something like this and people will love it. Mm-hmm. Dance around to it. Be number one on their Spotify Wrapped.
And I always, I'm always prepared for people to be like, that, like, I really don't understand why you enjoy that. And that's, that's a valid feeling to have.
Yeah. It's also kind of fun because it opens up the door to discussion. Yeah. Like, if I love something and you hate something, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Life would be so boring if everyone had the same opinion as I did.
It really would be. You need that discourse to just, and you need the space to just be allowed to enjoy and not enjoy things.
So I'm curious, this is kind of a tough question to answer right on the spot, but on that sentiment, are there any opinions you hold that are super unpopular?
Super unpopular.
Like pizza with pineapple or something.
Well, that's horrible and nobody should do
You don't like it?
No.
Really?
It's a terrible thing.
Well, I'm a fan. So
I know you are.
Look at that.
I overlook it for the sake of our friendship.
Agree to disagree.
I don't get it. I'm trying to think. I know they exist, but I'm trying to think of a good example.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what like the normal people are like. My hot take is.
Your hot take.
Well, and I feel like you said, like, even just kind of coming back all the way to the beginning when you were like, the fact that I still write things down, like, I prefer to write things by hand is a crazy thing because it's the complete opposite. Like, because when she writes stuff, she usually types it. She's going to edit it and, like, she likes to look at the different versions of it and stuff. And I'm just like, all of that happens for me, like, at once. I guess.
That's crazy. I don't know how you do it.
I guess there you go. There's a hot take.
My first draft always sucks.
I really don't rough draft at all. It's always been a struggle for me.
You don't need it.
Well, because
just that good.
Yes, I'm just that amazing. No, for me and the way that like my writing process or my brain works, like I do all of that as I go. Mm-hmm. So like if I'm going to write an essay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do it all at once.
Like steady line by line, clunk, clunk, clunk.
Yeah, like I'm going to do it start to finish. Because a little because I'm a procrastinator and like I have to do it start to finish or it's not going to be turned in. But also because I will spend that time like I think a little bit because I'll be like writing it and like formatting it in my head, and then it's like I'll go into it and just like write it down, and then I'll go back and be like, because sometimes I'll take a whole paragraph out and have to either move it or whatever, but I don't do that in different versions. It all happens in one sitting.
Dang, that's crazy. But hey, if it works for you, works for you. But now here's the kicker behind that. Is that approach something that you would push onto everyone else? Or is that something that you're going to is only for you?
I don't think it's only for me. Like I don't feel like I'm the, I don't feel like that's an original take or that I'm the only person that does that. But I definitely don't feel like I'd be like, what is the point of a rough draft? Mm-hmm. Like you don't need it. Like, because there are people who need to see, who need to outline and do just the bullet points and then expand on it, or who need to actually put in the work of like modifying things in parts, because sometimes whether it's because it's overwhelming or because it's just easier to focus on this paragraph and then this paragraph, I feel like there are definitely two different or different ways to do it,
which I think is a great perspective, that there's something for everyone and I'm not going to push my take onto anyone else unnecessarily, because that's where I take issue. Like like we've said, I'm totally happy for you to push out whatever brings you joy out into the world. Yeah. One, self-censorship, there's something to be said for that. Mm-hmm. And there's also something to be said for unsolicited advice. Yeah. Like, hey, I did this, you need to do it too.
Well, there's nothing worse than like yeah, like being even just in a completely random example, being at the gym and like you're, in the middle of doing something and then somebody comes up and is like, hey, this is how you use this machine. And you're like, cool, I haven't even begun to try to use it yet. So maybe give me a second. And like, if I'm going to injure myself, maybe stop me. But also, like, you don't know what I'm doing this for.
It's fair. Maybe I'm trying to use bad form. So like...
But, I was going to say, maybe that was...
Very good. But yeah, like, back to that professor who I had beef with.
Yeah.
One of the first red flags for him was when, on the first day of class, he's like, we're not going to be using laptops in this class because when I take notes on paper, I do better.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, if you take notes on paper, you'll do better. Like I said, I get the research on
Yeah.
that. For me, throughout my entire college tenure, I've taken notes on a laptop and I've been a straight A student. Like, that's what works for me.
Mm-hmm. And that's how you prepared yourself to take notes.
So that's how I prepared. That's how I've been successful. This is the pattern I'm used to. And I fully believe I will continue to be successful doing what I do. Mm-hmm. I figured that out for me. So who are you to say that won't work for you, man? Yeah. You got to do it my way because that's what works for me. It's like, I just hate that.
See, and I'm a person who, like, I have never once looked back at notes that I've written. Like, I will write them, but I don't study my notes.
Is that just because it sticks with you?
A little. I just, like, I feel like pretty good recall. So usually I can just, like if I was paying attention at the time, I don't need to like go back and reference the information so much. Mm-hmm. But also because I've never been very good at note taking. I think either because I haven't really figured out a way to do it or just because it's not the way that my brain works. But because I've always had that struggle with like I had kind of in a similar vein. I had one of my history teachers when I was in middle school. She made us take Cornell notes.
Oh yeah.
And
I hate those.
Yeah, and I was like, but like why? Because it has that space at the bottom that you're supposed to like write questions in, and that was the time when you get graded on everything. So you're getting graded on what your notebook looked like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't have any questions. Like I don't know what you want to put here, or like you have to put the topic. Titles or whatever off to the side.
And I hated all the wasted space because you get that like left column and the right column. The left column goes for like headings of stuff, but then you have like tons of empty space if you're not taking up the headings.
Yeah, it's usually like 9 pages when
I hated it. But the teacher's like, this is what you're supposed to do, so you do it. Don't figure out what's best for you. You do this.
Yes. And I had the same struggle in math with showing your work or like, there's nothing I hate more. And Lizzie can quote me on this than annotating a book or like a written work.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Like, it's so funny because if you like writing and authorship and stuff.
Yeah. But I don't, a little with like books because like I really hate writing in books. Or like I'm a person who doesn't bend the spine on my books.
Gotcha. Like your book is precious. You better not mess it up.
Yeah, and also like I have, if you want to do that to your books, cool.
Each their own.
But like, don't dog ear my pages. Please don't break my spine. Please don't write in my book for the love of God.
Yeah.
but even just like for school assignments and stuff, I was like, I don't feel the need to write off to the side what my thought was. Like I had the thought, I'll remember it, or like I'm not a person who needs to take those notes, I guess, or like who needs to annotate books. And so being forced to do anything that you don't necessarily want to do just immediately makes that like lockdown worse.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And I've learned this a lot in my leadership coaching class, which has actually been really cool in some aspects. Not so cool in some others, which we can get to. But one of the cool aspects was advice is actually way more powerful if they give it to themselves.
Yeah.
So, like, if you have something you want to say to them, instead of just giving them the advice point blank, they're going to, like, shoot it down, like, stupid, because I didn't come up with it.
Yeah.
It's that human tendency, But if you can ask them questions and lead them to that conclusion on their own, they love it, they take ownership for it, because it's their idea, and they get to implement it.
And it's not like, I'm doing this for someone else, or because somebody else told me to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing that humans have, like, a natural tendency to dislike what somebody tells you. That's just so funny.
Well, I feel like it also goes into that, like, and some of it, I feel like it's a space where, like, you can't read everybody's thoughts. So sometimes you don't know, maybe they were just about to come up to that idea, and that's why that is frustrating. You know, like there's nothing worse than being like I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but like you're about to do the dishes or vacuum or something, and then like your mom comes in and is like, "Hey, do this," and then you're like, "Well, now I don't.
Now I don't want it.
Like, now I would rather do anything else."
Like, why is that? Is that like some biological precursor that helped in evolution? Like,
I don't know.
How did that come up in humans?
I feel like it's just it's just kind of like you were saying a little bit, just like the inherent desire to not be told what to do.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to do something because I want to do it, and not just because.
Gotcha.
Just because I was ordered to do it.
So it's a human desire to be master of their own fate.
Maybe. I think in my example, it's a little more because like when you want to do it, it's a favor, and when your mom tells you to do it, it's a chore.
Yeah.
And
it feels much better to serve than it does to complete a required task. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tough.
But yeah, it's rough.
Yeah. I have something to say too. It's on the tip of my tongue. Just blanking. It's just that time of night.
We'll get there.
Oh yeah, my coaching class.
Yes.
It's kind of kooky. It was not what I thought it was going to be.
No?
No, well, I thought like leadership coaching, and I was thinking of all the executive coaching videos that I see on Instagram of like solid advice from experienced people. Here's how you teach. Here's how you lead. Like very practical, utilitarian strategy type stuff.
Okay.
And instead, it's very soft. Like, oh no, we don't coach people in the athletic sense of coaching, like giving them skills and drills and things to do. Instead, we just ask them questions.
We guide people. We don't.
Yeah, it's like, what's your goal? What's going to help you achieve that? How does that align with your priorities? You just ask them questions.
Oh, you should hear my mom talk about seminary with those.
Yeah.
Do you know how the new seminary has been formatted?
Is that how it's formatted? Just questions?
Well, so I don't know if it's different or what it was like when you were doing it, but it was you're like, they're not, everything is, they have goals. Like you're not allowed to ask the students anymore, like if they've done their scripture reading. They just have to come up with like, at the beginning of the year, they come up with goals where it's like, I'm going to read, this much, or I'm going to read, this chapter or whatever a day. And then she can't be like, okay, like, did you do that? She has to just be like, all right, like, check in. How do you feel about your goals and stuff? So that's like, I think it's a little bit to take the pressure off and leave it, to make it less of a thing to be checked off and more of a spiritual experience to be had. But it also, just for my mom, it's like, okay, well, now, like, they could just be, now it's a lot easier to just be like, all right, I did it, but you didn't at all. Yeah, just totally BS your way through it. It's like, I feel so good about my goals. Yeah. Which maybe, it is seminary at the end of the day. Like, it's supposed to be a place where integrity can be garnered, so. For sure. Got to give them opportunities. Not everybody has their own agency. But yeah, it seems to be an interesting trend, both like on the micro level and the macro, like societal level, of becoming less and less and less abrasive. Like with seminaries, like we can't set a goal for them anymore. Instead, it's like, set your own goal and check in with yourself about that. In the coaching class, it's not like, hey, like, I'm going to ask you some questions, but then I'm going to have a candid conversation with you. I'm going to tell you my insights. But it's just like, dude, if you're even expressing your opinion at all during that coaching, like, you're in the wrong. Like, if you say, oh, that's great, I love that, cool, you're giving away your opinion. Yeah. Which is like, oh no, you can't do that. Yeah. I feel like, and I feel like there's give and take to anything, but I think it definitely facilitates the necessity for patience, because I feel like that is an important thing when you're dealing with anybody, whether it be in a leadership position or, you see it, you deal with kids as a parent or anything. Yeah. But it's like, there needs to be patience to allow people to mess up and allow people to learn, and and kind of like we were talking about with, note-taking stuff, to allow people to learn in the way that works best for them, whether that infuriates you or you feel like, that takes too much time. Yeah. It's like, patience is important. And that's why I do see value in the coaching class, because it has taught me to be patient, let them come to their own conclusions. Right. They know their situation infinitely better than I do, so they might as well solve their own problems, and I just kind of need to probe it the right way. Right. But at the same time, there are moments where I'm like, if I could just like throw out an idea, right, and see how they handle that, see how they navigate that, see how they feel about that, I think that would be really advantageous. Yeah. But instead, I feel like I'm walking through a minefield of like, what can I say? What can't I say? Right. It locks you into that position of like, you can have the conversation, but you can't participate in the conversation. Yeah. And you're like, well, makes it really hard. At that point, I feel like ChatGPT. Yeah. You might as well go like, ChatGPT, can you ask me some questions about my life from the school? Can you solve my problems for me, please? Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my coaching class. Good and bad. It's been interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah. I think it's still useful though. Like all things considered, I think I have got better at asking questions.
That's good.
Yeah.
I feel like even in anything when you're like, okay, because I feel like that with my institute class, like I have one.
Are you teaching or just taking it? Okay.
I teach Sunday school, but
Oh, you teach Sunday school.
I do. I only taught
Big
one
time. One and done.
Yeah, I was out of town the other time, so I got out of it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anything is being gained from it, but I accepted the calling. So
That's sweet. Well, good on you.
thank you. But yeah, I have an institute thought. Kind of like with your professor, he just because I go to David Butler's on Thursday, and I really like
He's
David
fine.
Butler.
He's so good.
And I feel like his method of teaching and just his stories and stuff resonate with me better. I feel like that is kind of the way that I just like recognize kind of a kinship in the like his stories or just the way he talks about the gospel and stuff.
Yeah.
But then on Wednesday, I really just go for the sake of like us to say that I went or like to see the social aspect more.
Hour.
But he's really hard for me because it's hard for me to pay attention and it's hard for me to focus and stuff. But anyway, the point of that is that like even just being there though, like I still feel the spirit in being in an institute class, even though I'm not necessarily getting anything like profound from it. It's still like, this is, it's still a nice feeling or space to me. And I feel like, kind of like with your leadership class and stuff, that it's like, anytime you're learning anything, even if it's not, or having a new experience, even if it's not 100%, the best thing you've ever done. It's like, there's always some value to it.
That's a good point. And I love the optimism because I totally do agree that there are things that we can learn from everything and everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the thing that you're learning is like, hey, I never want to be like that or do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
even if the thing that you're learning is a positive negative.
Yeah. And I think like osmosis learning is a real thing too. Where like if you're just present in an environment
Mm-hmm.
and you hear something that you may not even remember, I think like way down the road, all of a sudden that memory can like resurface. Be like, I think I read this one thing from somewhere, and then suddenly it's applicable.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen the TV show Limitless?
Yes.
They also made a movie called Limitless, so I
I've
kind of got both there.
I know I've seen parts of the TV show. I haven't seen it in its entirety, but
yeah, it's kind of a cool premise of how, I mean, less cool that you got to take a drug to access the parts of your mind, but cool
Right.
in the sense of like Brian Finch, the main character,
Mm-hmm.
just by experiencing life and being able to recall those memories,
Mm-hmm.
he's such a more effective human being.
Yeah.
Like he approaches a situation, and if he was like old Brian Finch, you'd have like no idea how to get through it. But just having access to those memories, like those osmosis learning moments, all of a sudden he's super effective and knows the correct answers.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that same thing too. Is like you learn so much from other people without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Like usually, and just the influence other people have on each other is important.
Yeah. It was a cool phrase I heard on the Joe Rogan podcast today I was listening to. They said that personalities are as infectious as diseases.
Oh.
So I guess kind of taking that, like you learn from people as well as like your personality, your character is modified according to the people you hang out with. Like if you're sick and I have a podcast with you and we chat for an hour and a half, odds are I might come away kind of sick.
Yeah.
But like if you bring in like a positive infectious energy into the room, like I'm going to get that as well.
Right. And you're going to like, I feel like it helps too. When you're like, yeah, like I feel like you and Mason talked about it a little bit in like in one way, but it like when you're around people that just like make you feel inherently comfortable or like, like you're able to just have that free flowing conversation that it's like, whether you recognize what that tool or that skill is that you want to try to be that for other people in other aspects of your life where you're like, oh, I remember that this is how I felt, like this is how this person makes, like you said, like makes the room feel or whatever. So I want to try to figure out if that's how I help other people feel or, if I can be that person.
It opens up your mind to the possibilities. And it's also cool living in the age where you can interact with tons of people, like whether that's through social media, like they may not interact with you, but you can interact with them. Like talking with Mason, I talked about like the Jocko podcast and how I've spent hundreds of hours with Jocko and he has no idea.
Oh yeah.
But consequently, like his personality and his character has rubbed off on me. And it's neat in the sense of when I was a kid, I was often asked the question of like, who's your role model?
Mm-hmm.
And I never had just one. I had like a few dozen. Like, oh, I like this characteristic in this guy, I like this characteristic in the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of cool in the sense that you can build like a Frankenstein personality based on what you find to be valuable.
Yeah. I wrote it was like a text post type thing one time, but it was talking about like basically that same thing where it's I don't know if I saved it, but it was like this person talking about, is like they the way that they make ramen noodles is like was influenced by like an ex-boyfriend and like and it's like, the reason that you have certain mannerisms and you do certain things or like um that stuff is it can be so you can remember that and it's called back to other people or their experiences and stuff and you're like it's interesting to see the way even when those people aren't in your life anymore how much like they have influenced like kind of like you were saying like how your personality has been formed.
No, that's dead on. I remember the post you're talking about. I feel like I saw something similar where it's like the way you cook mirrors the way this person used to cook.
Yeah.
The way you talk mirrors the way this person used to talk. And
Mm-hmm.
it goes through like line by line by line. It's really eye-opening to see just how influenced your behavior and your opinions are from other people.
Right. So I'm trying to see if I saved it.
Yeah, that was a cool post. I'm gonna plug it into ChatGPT, see if it can find it for me.
Do it. I say I'm not a person who uses ChatGPT, but my friend Taylor really it saves her so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ChatGPT has nothing on it. It's giving me just a roundabout generality. But yeah,
right.
I know the post you're talking about, and it's phrased really poetically.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just a really interesting idea where you're like, I do this like this because it was shown to me this way, or because, I watched. I feel like that same thing too, where it's like with parents, like the way I fold my towels is because that's the way my mom taught me to do it, or like because
just the super small stuff.
Yeah, or just the way that the way you part your hair or the way you walk or that kind of stuff. It's like whether because you want to emulate a role model or just because, that is the example that was available to you. It all has an influence.
Which is really profound if you think about it the other way around, the impact that you have on other people's lives.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there was a missionary who I never really interacted with, but when we got back, he came up to us like, yo, like, Ellie Richardson, you inspired me so much on the mission. I wrote a piano piece based off the departing testimony that you gave and complete with lyrics. And I was like, really? Like,
that's crazy.
That's crazy. Like, it's so out of the blue. Like, I'm glad you took something away from that. But, like, there's a point to how you can influence and impact people's lives and have no idea why you're doing it, which is both scary and cool. You could be impacting them for the worse for all you know.
For sure. Well, because I feel like I have an experience like that where things that don't even occur to me in the moment, and like I'm going to tell the story. I don't want it telling to my own horn at all, but because I remember just because my mom and me had like this conversation immediately after this experience, but because we were at church and in the ward we were in, there was this family that like just was one of those, we don't really mesh like when the vibes are off.
I see. But not everyone's supposed to get along.
Yeah. But I remember we were it was like after church or whatever, everybody had been let out and like was going home. And we were standing there and their youngest daughter, who was probably about 3, she had come up and she was looking for her parents, but she like couldn't find them. And so me and my mom were standing here and like talking to people or whatever. And she was like, and so the little girl comes up and she's like, do you know where my mom is? Or like, and that's what my mom was just kind of off the cuff was like, well, they're probably in the last place that you saw them or whatever. And then I like leaned down and was like, well, how about like, I was like, are you looking for both of them or whatever? I was like, well, how about we like go check the chapel and see if they're still in class or whatever. And so like I took her hand and we went and found her and like they were in the chapel and I just like she just went to her family and I went back. But I remember when we were in the car to go home, my mom was like, she was like, that was really humbling for me to watch you, it was like, because my reaction to it was so different than hers because my mom was just like, oh, here's, like, it's just like, not that she was annoyed, but just like, common sense, like they're probably, they're probably in the big room with everyone else.
Yeah.
But then it's like you look at it through the eyes of a 3-year-old, and she's like, she's staring at knees, like she doesn't know.
And her parents are the whole world.
Yeah, where it's like she's little, and this is a big room. There are a lot of people, and that's what my mom said. She was like, it was really humbling to watch you just like take the time to like get on her level and be like, like, and help her instead of just being like, oh well, you figure it out yourself.
Yeah. I think this is an excellent example of how a little decision, huge impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, it'd be interesting to talk with that little girl to see if she remembers that experience. Be like, like Lily's forever just emblazoned on my mind.
I was like, I doubt it, but yeah, it would be
that's how young she was. It's funny. I actually have a really similar story, and I'm like slightly hesitant to share this on the podcast just because it is embarrassing. Because I was in the bad spot in this case. But yeah, so it was back in Brazil, and it mirrored perfectly the Good Samaritan story.
Oh, really?
Where I was not the Good Samaritan. So we were walking to church with all of our friends. We like gathered up from all their houses. We're all going to take them to church and have a good time. Mm-hmm. And we had to walk through this marketplace. So it was like me, my companion, and like the 4 people who were leading to the church. Mm-hmm. And as we're walking through the market, there was like this homeless man like laying in the middle of the street. Smelled like feces, like kind of beat up, like bloody, bruised, like he's just a homeless guy. He's not
having a rough day.
Yeah. And so I hurry past him. I'm like, okay, guys, we're kind of running a little late to church. Let's go. Mm-hmm. And I see my companion like stop down and kneel next to the guy. I'm like, internally, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? We gotta go.
We're late.
Like,
we have to get places.
And he woke up the man. I was like, dude, are you okay? Like, did you just get like mugged or something? Like, my Portuguese sucks, so I honestly couldn't tell what he said. Right. But like my companion helped like walk him over, sat him down, gave him some money for breakfast, gave him like a pamphlet with our number in case he needed anything else. Yeah. And then we kept walking to the church. And I remember like I continued the rest of the walk to the church in silence and just thought to myself, like, throughout my entire life, I've considered myself to be a good person. Yeah. And any time in church where we read the story of the Good Samaritan, I'm always like, I'm the Good Samaritan.
Right,
I'm going to help the guy. And then real life played out, and I was not the Good Samaritan. It was like earth-shattering for me. It's like, who am I? Yeah. I'm obviously not who I thought I was, because I was not the guy that saw the need and met the need.
Well, and I feel like it's important to remember, too, that, like, those don't take away from the times that you were the Good Samaritan. Yeah. Then, like, that those other experiences definitely happened, and I think it's just that makes those times so much more powerful, because you recognize that, like, you have to consciously be taking the time to think of other people, and like sometimes you do get caught up in your world and your life, and that's okay. But yeah, and I think it's that where, like we were talking about with the influence of other people, is like that's why we are all put in each other's lives, and why our shared experiences are so important, is because like you said, it's like it may not have occurred to you to like remember that experience if he hadn't also taken the time to be the Good Samaritan.
Oh, that's true. There's no chance I would have ever thought twice about that experience. Yeah. I'm so grateful for my companion, and it revolutionized my idea. And I remember walking to the church and just kind of made like a silent promise to myself that, hey, if a situation like that ever comes up again, I'm not going to be the person that passes up an opportunity to serve. Yeah. And so I like to think that I've learned from that. For all I know, I may have walked by people that were really in need of help, and I still did nothing. But if nothing else, yeah, excellent example of how the impact that other people's have and that we have, it just has a huge impact all around. Like small ripples go to big, big ripples.
Well, I feel like that's something me and Lizzie talk about it all the time, because like one of the biggest, and more so for her than for me, but like one of the biggest comments or most common things that people will say when they like when she talks about me or whatever, is like it baffles people that I'm like so like strong in my faith and like am a member of the church and stuff, whereas like she at base level is like such the opposite, because she's not she's not really religious, and she's LGBTQ, and she has tattoos and all of this stuff, and so like it blows people's minds that we're best friends.
It was interesting to me meeting Lizzie first. This was super cool, don't get me wrong. I thought she was awesome, but I was like, really, like Lily and Lizzie, I would never put you two together. I was like, yeah, best friends forever.
Well, that's what, it blows people's minds. And a lot of that is because, like, we've known each other since we were 9. Like, we have been friends for a really long time. And, like, we've put in the work to facilitate that relationship and make sure that, like, we've taken the time to be like, this is something like this friendship and that we have like is something that we want to make sure stays healthy and like continues for the rest of our lives. And so like we put that work in, but also but yeah, and so I think it's so funny that they're just like it just completely baffles people, and that's what we it's given us the space too to be like to kind of facilitate that like understanding of different people, because I know for a lot of things like because I mean she's come to church with me and she's come to church activities with me and stuff, and so like that has given her the space to she's told me before where like she'll hear somebody having a conversation about like Mormonism or Mormons or whatever, and then like they will say something that like she knows is wrong, and she'll correct them, or she'll be like actually like that's not true, or that's not what they believe, or
That's
whatever.
really cool of her.
And so yeah, and so it's like really fun for me to like to be like, oh, like that's crazy that it's like she'll stand up for me because or like for the beliefs because she's had that experience and knows like she's seen it firsthand and knows that's not true. And like the same way for me where it's like I kind of feel like I get to have that in the reverse where when people will be like, either bigoted or judgmental towards like the LGBTQ community, or like when I hear somebody say something that I'm like, okay, well, like that's not true, then I get to have that also that experience where it's like opens up that compassion and understanding too.
Which is a super powerful case example of the power of diversity and understanding. Like, it's incredible that people from such incredibly different backgrounds have come together and chosen to prioritize a relationship in spite of their differences, and then have both people come away more enlightened and more capable and willing to enlighten other people.
Yeah.
When disruptions or inaccuracies come up. And there's been a huge trend, I think, and like once again, who am I? Like, take all this with a grain of salt. Like, whoever's listening to this, like, I'm just some college student with some perspectives on the world. Could be completely wrong.
Right. We're literally just airing out our thoughts.
Yeah. But from my perceptions, it seems like the world is becoming more and more I stick with my tribe, my people.
Oh, yeah.
Which makes sense from like a human perspective.
Yeah.
You want to hang out with people who share your same values. But
for sure,
you and Lizzie, excellent case example of how interacting with people unlike you are going to make you a better person. It's going to make them a better person. You're each going to come away more understanding, and more people, like the people you talk to about the LGBTQ community, people that she talks to about the LDS community, better understanding all around, because so much tension arises in the world simply due to misunderstanding. For sure.
Well, and like you said, it's like you look at just like America in general, it's like this is like probably the most polarized the country has ever been, since that we were fighting each other in a civil war.
Yeah. That's a good point.
but like you said, it's like, and obviously you want to be, like you said, with people who share your beliefs and stuff, because like you have support in those people.
Yeah.
But it's also important to have that other perspective and understanding of where other people come from. And I think me and Lizzie have said it too, where it's like it's fantastic that we get to have that opportunity to kind of like correct misunderstandings or like incorrect beliefs. But it's also like a lot of times it's like, we're also so much more than just those two things, than just like than the Mormon and the gay.
Once again, so nuanced, so complex, so much depth.
There's like, we have so many other, like we built the friendship on so many other things that it's like you can be friends with people that you don't, like I'm friends with you and you put pineapple on pizza, and that's
crazy.
Horrible, but
it shouldn't work, but hey.
But here we are.
Yeah. And that's why there's huge power in that.
Yeah.
I think it's huge. I think, and it all just comes down to spending time. I think like if you really had to boil down the formula to like what can I actually do to have better understanding, just spend time.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie McFarland USA?
The
cross country coach.
Yeah.
Beautiful movie.
I met Thomas Vaya actually.
Which one is he?
He's the main, like
the coach.
No, he's not Kevin Costner. He's the he's like the fastest runner.
Oh, okay.
And like the guy when he's like running.
Met him in person.
Yeah, he was at a cross country meet that we heard.
That's crazy. Did you know who he was at the time?
Mm-hmm. It was like. It was a couple years after the movie had come out, so I'd seen the movie, and that's what before we got there. That's what our cross country coach was saying he was going to be there. So it was really cool. He was like around like signing shirts. And
that's awesome. It was really cool. So did you get your shirt signed?
No, I didn't have a shirt like for him, but I did get to meet him and see him.
That's still pretty cool. So pretty cool. But yeah, like in that movie, you get the white guy and the Hispanic community, and initially they're kind of at odds, but then over time they just spend time. Like he's out in the fields picking the crops with them.
Yeah.
And like he hurts his back, but then they're spending time with him and vice versa. And then they come to this mutual understanding of like, you know what, this white guy's pretty cool. Like, you know what, like we're all in it in this life trying to achieve the same goals. We want happiness, we want fulfillment, we want peace for our families. We just want to take care of each other.
Yeah.
And just a powerful example of just spending time.
Well, and it also takes out like you cannot just take everybody at face value. You know, like they have that whole scene in that movie when I think he's the cousin, like pulls up with his car club, and like Kevin Costner's immediately like running.
Yes,
he's like,
get back defensive, in the car, like,
and it's like, and that's what he's saying. He's like, you know, it's like, and he even he admits that, you know, it's like, yeah, in a different life, that would have been why we were there. That's what I was doing. But like, you know, now I'm just trying to be in a cool car with my friends, like, you know, just see the cool car with my friends.
Yeah.
And I feel like you said, it was like taking the time to just get to know people and see where they come from is important. And that, yeah, just judgments really have no place in compassion.
Yeah. And it's interesting how stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, and yet they're so commonly broken. Like if I had $1 for every time someone said something along the lines of like, oh, wow, you're not as blank as I thought you would be.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd be incredibly rich. Like when I went down to Brazil, I love spicy food. And like, you're a white guy, man. You can't handle spicy food. And then I like eat their spiciest pepper. Like, oh, this is pretty good. They're like, I've never seen a white guy do that before.
That's crazy.
Like vice versa. You know, like I just feel like they're broken all the time. And but many people don't see that. Because they don't spend time.
Well, and I've had a lot of conversations with people about that stuff too, where it's like, you know, you also, where it's like you have to spend time to get to know people, but also, you know, like that where those stereotypes and stuff come from, then it's like you can't, it also helps you understand, you know, like for me, being a person of color, where it's like I have experiences where like I've been judged because of the color of my skin, but also I'm not, you know, I'm not completely Mexican. So it's like, I'm not as dark as some people are. And so it's like, I don't have those same struggles necessarily, but it also doesn't take away from the fact that like, you know, it has happened. And so I think it helps to, you know, you spend the time and you learn those things about people, and it like, it opens up the opportunity to have those conversations about, you know, where the stereotypes come from and how to break them. And just like you said, like having an understanding of people's lives.
Yeah. I think that's great. Well, we have hit an hour and 42 minutes.
Go us.
Wow. That is incredible. Should get a prize or something for that.
I would say, is this the longest one? Get a prize for talking forever?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how long me and Mason talked for.
I would say, I think it was over.
Just over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Huh.
There you go.
Well, any last thoughts that you want to share? Anything else you want to chat about? Yeah.
I think so. I mean, like, obviously, we've been sitting here talking for almost 2 hours. So we can obviously continue this conversation forever, but...
Of course. Well, it just gives me an excuse to have you back on the podcast.
Well, there you go.
Which really just means an excuse to just chat with you some more.
There you go. Yeah, I'm here for it. I think I like the way that you're doing it, for sure. And because I feel like when you and Mason talked about it in y'all's first one, and I agree with it. It's like, it's fun, even if, you know, nothing comes from it, because that's not what you're in it for. Yeah. It's like, it's just fun to talk to people about just whatever comes up. And, you know, it's fun to be able to go back and listen to it. And so, like, if that's all that this is, then I feel like you've succeeded.
Sweet. Thank you. I think it's been great too. Like just hearing your stories, your perspectives, your opinions. Like I hear them like one off from like we go sledding and I hear something, or like we go swing dancing and I hear something, but there's so few and far between. So it's really cool to just like, let's just sit down and hear them all back to back to back to back to back.
Yeah. It helps you actually stop and take the time out to
really figure out people, see a bit more of that depth, that nuance, that complexity. Mm-hmm. It's cool. Sure. So yeah, thanks for spending the time. Thanks for crashing with us. I know it's late.
Thanks for letting me.
Yeah, of course. And bye, everyone.
Peace out, guys.